were just talking at my table, there we go, with Jim and Hammy about LinkedIn. And I was saying, oh my gosh, there's some people on LinkedIn, their profile photos really need to be more professional. And then look at this profile photo. I am wearing a coonskin cap and holding a pecan log roll. So that does not work for every CEO, but if your family's fortune was made by selling rubber alligators and coonskin caps and ashtrays shaped like toilets that say, put your butts here, this might work. It definitely has worked for our brand. So I first just want to say thank you, Carl, thank you, Linda, thank you, everyone. It is such a delight not only to be here, but to be the first speaker after 2.5 years. I don't know about you, but I am so excited to be among people again. During COVID, I would talk, yes, applaud that. I got to know my mail lady. I got to know my UPS person. I was so hungry to talk to people, I literally would run out and talk to the Amazon person just to have that human interaction. So this is just terrific. I also want to give a shout out to the people running for office. As you may have heard in my introduction, I had 7 terms in the Georgia General Assembly. Yes, my name is Stephanie, and I am a recovering politician. But when I first ran for office, one of the best things someone told me, because I remember being absolutely terrified, getting in front of people and talking. And I used to go to a lot of church services and politic. Pastor Willie, you will appreciate that. And I remember they would call me up to the pulpit to speak on Sundays and being absolutely terrified. And someone leaned over to me once when I was being called up on the pulpit, and they said, Stephanie, politics is about getting out of your comfort zone. And so for all of you running for office, Jerry, Carmen, thank you for getting out of your comfort zone. I'm sorry, I missed the lawyer, and I need to hooray for you. Leah, thank you. Thank you for the lawyers running. I'm also recovering an attorney. But it's hard, and it's a public service, and I know people don't always thank you, and especially small-town mayors, hardest job there is. My dad served in Congress for a decade, and you'll appreciate this. I used to ask him, Dad, why didn't you serve as mayor of Macon, Georgia? You know, we're from right near Macon, and he said, oh, honey, mayor of a town is the hardest job. People will stop you everywhere, and the reason is, politics is local. Politics is about community. Politics is about making sure that your water is turned on and that your streets are clean and that your quality of life is good. And so every single one of you, I could tell from your speeches that it's from the heart. So as a recovering politician, I want to thank you. And since I am accustomed to politics and I am not afraid to get out there with really controversial issues, I'm going to start off with something that's a little controversial. How do you say P-E-C-A-N? So, if you pronounce it pecan, raise your hand. Okay, quite a few of you. All right, who says pecan? Oh, come on. All right, there's a few of us. This is the South. So, that's what I say, and that's okay. I get a lot of jokes. I'm not going to go there with what the jokes are about. I'm sure you can imagine. But I am originally from Middle Georgia, Eastman, Georgia. And where I come from, we say pecan, and I do my absolute best when I'm in mixed company to say pecan, so I sound like I'm refined. But the South Georgia in me definitely slips out, and I'll say pecan, and then before I know it, I'm saying all y'all and over yonder. So I will do my best to be refined. What my grandfather said, though, and I think he settles the debate. He said, I call them pecans when I pick them and pecans when I sell them. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my family's journey because some of you, I think, and I know from talking to you, have been to Stuckey's, remember us from road trips, and thank you, those nodding, you paid for my college education, I am grateful. But some of the students especially, you may not have grown up with Stuckey's. Hopefully you will soon learn of our brand because we are making a comeback. But for those of you who may not know the company, or those of you who do, you may not know the story. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story, but then I also want to talk about 3 lessons that I have learned in my journey of buying my family's company back 2 years ago, and it has been a wild, crazy road trip that I have been on. So this is how we started in 1937. This was during the Great Depression. My grandfather had to drop out of college at the University of Georgia, and he had to go farm cotton in South Georgia, which is no fun. And he wanted another way out. Stuckey started as a side hustle. I am a huge champion of the side hustle. Anyone in here have a side hustle? Yes, side hustles are great. Thank you for raising your hand. He started Stuckey's as a side hustle. Jobs were rare in that part of the state, but there was one thing that was plentiful: pecans. And it was a bumper crop, so he started selling pecans in this little shed on the side of the road. And one day he asked my grandmother Ethel if she could help him make some candy. Thought the pecans would sell better if he made candy. And so she went in the kitchen with her 6 sisters. None of them really knew how to make candy, but they figured it out. And she had sisters named Oreen, Hazel, Georgia Lee. We're from the South. Bertie, Pearl, I'm trying to remember them all. But they went in the kitchen, they figured out how to make pralines and divinity, and what became our signature dish that my grandmother came up with, her candy, pecan log rolls. So they came up with the candy. They started selling them. That little shed did well enough to get that, the first Stuckey store. And like any great entrepreneur, what you're doing is solving a problem that people have. And back then, if you were driving, if you took a road trip, there were no interstates. You were taking the back roads, and there were no gas stations at every exit. There was no Buc-ee's. There was no Texaco. There was no Travel Plazas of America. My grandfather started what was the first roadside retail chain that offered gas, clean restrooms, tacky souvenirs, because who doesn't want a statue made of shells and an alligator head? So he sold all this kitschy stuff, quilts, citruses, honey from local farmers, and then we sold our full line of pecans and snacks and candies. And he had a little snack bar. And so he had a really good business, and it grew. After World War II, the business really took off, and he started adding stores. And we became what was really synonymous with the Great American Road Trip. So those of you who are blessed enough to have taken road trips in those Woody station wagons in the 1960s and 70s, thank you for nodding your head. That little girl could have been me. I'm number 4 of 5 kids, which meant I got way in the back of the station wagon on every road trip. And I absolutely loved being in the back because my dad could not reach that far back to swat at me when we were misbehaving. And maybe there wasn't any air conditioning, but we had the windows rolled down. I'd stick my feet out. And the best part is I would stick my arm out and do this. Y'all know what that means. And this was back in the day of CB radios and truckers and Breaker 19. And so I would get all these trucks to honk, and my dad would be like, "Don't make me pull over." So that was our era, the road trip. And we had so much fun. And Stuckey's was right there with the rest of America as a welcoming oasis where you could pull over and have this wonderful experience. And so we were part of that generation. And at our peak, we had 368 stores in 40 states. My grandfather had a trucking company. He had a billboard company. He had 4,000 billboards. I talked to a woman last week. I gave a talk, and she raised her hand afterwards, and she said, "I don't have a question. I just need to share a story." My youngest brother learned to read thanks to Stuckey's because he read your billboards, and they were Stuckey's 100 miles, Stuckey's 50 miles, Stuckey's 20 miles. And so we were all over the interstate. My grandfather used to joke he spent more money on billboards than he did on candy and merchandise. He put 20% of everything he made into, Hami, you'll appreciate this, marketing. And that's how he really grew his brand. And I put this in for Carl. The great thing about Stuckey's is we were really part of people's experiences and bringing families together. And I love this photo. The best thing I got when I got the family business back was 6 boxes of my grandfather's archives. And it was just a treasure trove, not only the past, but really a guidepost for the future of how I can bring this company back, looking at his values and looking at his character and looking at what he thought was important in building a company. And so even though you may do things differently, you look at the past to see what are the values that our brand represents. And we represented being a place where families always knew that they were welcome. And we had people who loved to go fishing. We had a couple of stores that are right near fishing holes. And so I found this in the archives, this picture of a guy holding up a giant fish. And I love this picture so much, I used it for a caption contest on Facebook. And the winner, the caption was, "This is what you get when you fish with pecan log rolls as bait." But sadly, I think any great story, you have to have a downfall in order to have a comeback. And so this was our downfall. My grandfather sold the company in 1964. It was a year before I was born. And he sold it for good reasons, to make money, and he thought he found a good partner. But what happened was a series of corporate takeovers, and our brand was trashed. And I call these ghost stores. There's hundreds of these. In fact, there's only 15 original Stuckey stores still standing. And some of them are shuttered, and some of them have become other businesses. Some of them become, frankly, not great businesses. There's ones that's a strip club in Florida, which really breaks my heart. But this one is in Florida too. It's the Florida Citrus Center. And I go and see that, and I know it used to be a Stuckey's. It used to be my family's business. It used to be our heritage, and I see someone else owning that company. But at least it's still around. I posted that actually on LinkedIn this morning, and I wrote in the comment, I said, "I wonder if this Florida Citrus Center knows that they're adopted, and I'm really their mother." So this is how we started to get the company back. And I think in the movies too often we see these comebacks, like Rocky is one of my favorite movies. And we see like Rocky wins the big fight. I hope I'm not spoiling it for anyone. Hopefully you've all seen it like 10 times like I have. But comebacks are often not this snap thing that happens overnight. It's a long slog. And our slog back, we're still making it. But it started in 1985 when my father got the company back. The last company that had owned it before we got it back was a Chicago railroad conglomerate, whose name I don't even say. They're Voldemort in our house. They're they whose name shall not be spoken, because they really did trash the company and sell hundreds and hundreds of stores for the real estate, not knowing the value of the brand. But a Chicago real estate company, no disrespect if you're from Chicago, they did not get a quirky Southern brand that sells pecan log rolls and coonskin caps. And so they trashed it. And they pretty much gave it back to my father to avoid litigation from franchisees. And he got the company back, but he was running 5 other businesses. He was very successful. And Stuckey's was basically a side hustle for him that he kept it going. And fast forward 30 years, my dad and all his business partners retire, and they leave just a couple of people running the company. And it started to plummet. And there was a decade where there was really no one managing Stuckey's, and it was 6 figures in debt. And that's where I come in. I am minding my own business, and I get a call from one of my dad's business partners, former business partners, and he said, "Stephanie, do you want to buy Stuckey's?" I'd never thought about that, but I was so flattered that they thought that me, no MBA, never run a business, never been a CEO, 0 experience, but they had enough confidence that they thought I could run Stuckey's. They're asking me to buy the company. So I call my grandfather's other 6 grandchildren. Turns out they'd all been asked before me. And so I was not the first choice. But I saw something that my siblings and my cousins did not see. And I saw something that, no disrespect, Carl, to accountants, because I did talk to financial advisors and they looked at the books and they said, this company is 6 figures in debt. This is not a good financial decision. And I kept going to financial advisors till I found one who said, this is not a good decision, but there is something that's not on the books. And what's not on the books is the value of the brand. What's not on the books is people nodding their heads saying, I remember pulling over at Stuckey's. What's not on the books is what Carl remembers fishing with his uncle and pulling over. And I thought, there's enough people around who remember this brand that this company can make it. And then there was an emotional part as well. Well, this was emotional already, but I loved my grandfather. I remember going to the Stuckey's candy plant with him when I was a kid, and even though he'd sold it, he had rights to the candy plant. And I just remember him bursting with pride, seeing what he had built, seeing that they made candy, seeing how he employed people, seeing how he grew the small town where we were from. And I didn't want our legacy to be a bunch of ghost stores shuttered that other businesses had come in and run. So I bought the company with my life savings. So that's a good thing about being an entrepreneur at 50-ish. I did not have any experience running a company, but I did have something really important. I had good credit, and I had savings. And I also had what I think I like to say I had emotional maturity, because I'd been through a lot of different careers. And so all of that served me well. And I sunk everything I had into buying Stuckey's. And here's what I bought. We did not own any real estate. We have 65 locations that were franchised, but then I consulted a franchise attorney, and we were way out of compliance with franchise law, and we were facing all those stores being shut down for being out of compliance, so we had to redo them all as licenses. So I had that situation. And we had a rented warehouse full of dusty inventory, and I had a trademark. So the actual assets that I owned were franchise agreements that weren't worth anything. I had a trademark, and I had dusty inventory in a warehouse. Some of that inventory had not turned in a decade. So for you students, you probably have already figured this out, but if you have inventory that's not turning in a decade, that's really bad. And we had stuff like, I went through the boxes, we had stuff like those cowboy hats, and we had cases of Britney Spears t-shirts. Thank God she made a comeback. We made a killing off of those. So I had a lot to work with. So I'll tell you how I did it. So I'm going to give a bit of a spoiler alert. Fast forward, that was November 2019 when I bought the company, when that lovely photo was shot. And it's been 2.5 years. We ended that first year, 2019, we ended the year $133,000 in debt, and we did have 2.4 million gross sales, but we were operating in the red. I learned if you have a parentheses around a number, it's not good. It's a negative. So we ended with 133 in parentheses, 133,000. We just ended 2021 with 2.5 million net and over 12 million gross. So, yep. So how did we do it? And so those are some of the lessons I want to share with you. And I like to have fun. Whenever I get stressed out, and I do get stressed, and I do have those 3 a.m. moments, I think anyone in business does, but you have to just put it all in perspective. And I just joke, it's just candy. We're selling pecan log rolls and rubber alligators, so you just cannot take yourself too seriously. But I'm going to tell you 3 lessons that I learned from my grandfather in large part, from reading his archives, from reading the stories and those boxes that I got when I bought the company that have served me and bringing the company back, and I hope will serve you in whatever career journey you take. And the first is the art of bootstrapping. I think too often we're led to believe, and if you're a consultant, yes, you're important and I respect you, but too often in business, especially if you're a small business and you don't have a big budget, you feel like you have to use all these consultants. I went through $30,000 that we did not have my first 6 months on consultants that we could not afford. And I quickly learned some of the stuff you have to do yourself. And you have to learn it yourself. And then reading through my grandfather's papers, I saw he did it himself. The great thing about reading those papers is he went from being my big daddy, yes, that's what I called him, I'm Southern. He went from being big daddy to Stuckey. And I learned about this man I didn't even know about, that he was a great businessman, and he taught himself how to do stuff. So bootstrapping is being resourceful. And I have a box of coconut candy up there because that's one of my favorite stories that I learned about him. During World War II, there was rationing. So he couldn't get sugar, you couldn't get gas, people weren't really stopping at his stores. He had to figure out how to make his candy, and one of his best candies was coconut, and he couldn't get coconut either. So what he did was he got corn husks, and he shredded them, and he flavored them with coconut flavoring, and he put them in his patties, and people would stand around the block waiting. And so government folks will appreciate, this is before there were a lot of pesky government regs about what you could put in products. So you cannot get away with that today. We are highly, highly regulated in the food industry now. But back then, but I love that he did that. So when I found that box and I found that story, it was such an inspiration to me. Here's another example of doing it yourself. Nowadays, if you have an interstate chain, there's all this market research. You do traffic counts. You figure out exactly where's the best place to put my store. Well, you know how my grandfather figured out how far apart to space his stores and where to put the Stuckey stores on the interstate? He would get a cup of coffee, like he's drinking in that picture. He would get in his truck. He would start driving. He'd be drinking his coffee. You might see where this is going. When nature called, that's where he put his Stuckeys. And I would joke, if I'd only been on those trips with him, we would have had double the number of stores today. But anyway, so that's bootstrapping it. Here's the last one about him. This is another example of market research. If you saw my grandfather at a Stuckey store, he'd be in the stores, but more often than not, he would be in the parking lot. What's he doing in the parking lot? He would have a notebook, and he would look at where all the license plates were from. Where are these people coming from? He was really kind of nosy. He'd peek in the cars. You know, is this a business traveler? Is this a family? What are they doing? He wanted to understand his customer. The other thing he did was he would make all of his employees get their friends and everyone else and get their cars that they weren't driving, especially the like old cars they didn't drive that much, and park them all the time at the stores. So they always looked full, right? Nobody taught him that. He just figured it out by doing, right? So that's what he did. All right, so next lesson I learned is resilience. Any company that's been around as long as ours, and I call ourselves an 85-year-old startup, any company that's been around for decades, you've figured out resilience. And resilience is bouncing back stronger. It's not just bouncing back. That's sustainability. You're just sustaining where you were before. If you're resilient and something bad happens, and it will happen if you're in business long enough, when something bad happens, you not only bounce back, you figure out what happened that I can build back stronger. So that's what my grandfather did. So the interstate highway system, 1956, President Eisenhower says, I've seen the German Autobahn. I saw how they could move all sorts of, it started out as a military thing, like how quickly you can move arms through areas and quickly. And he's like, we need to do that in America for our defense, but also just to move goods and services. So he started the interstate highway system, wonderful in many respects, but before the interstate highway system, this is how you got through America. This is Route 66. If you went on a road trip, you would see small town America. This is Gallup, New Mexico. There was the old Dixie Highway. There was the Illinois Lincoln Highway that went cross country. And so these roads explored small town America. That's where Stuckey's was. So we went from that to that. And it wasn't about exploring America, it's about how fast can we get from point A to point B. But my grandfather had to make a decision. All of his stores were on these roads. So you know what he did? He not only shut down all of his stores and moved them, but he built back stronger. And he said, all right, I'm going to brand my stores. I'm going to have a consistent look. Before that, the stores were all over the place architecturally. He said, I'm going to have the same look for every store, but every store is going to be unique as far as the experience and what they sold, so you still had a sense of place. But he wanted people, when they were traveling the interstate, that they knew there's a reliable, consistent place that we can pull over. And so he celebrated it. He embraced it. All right, I have to go on the interstate. I'm going to say, traveling on beautiful Interstate 80, which I think is hilarious because not many people think Interstate 80 is beautiful. But he decided to celebrate and embrace it, and he created what is known as a classic Stuckey's look. He had this arched teal roof, and he had this sign that everyone started to recognize, and then he did a partnership deal with Texaco Gas. He got a penny for every gallon. Back then, that's a lot. He made a fortune off of selling gas with Texaco. And so he really figured out how to build back stronger as a result. But he still created that unique experience. And this is one of my favorite examples of creating a unique experience. And I didn't know that till I went through the archives and I found this picture of these visitors from India with a mynah bird in a Stuckey store. So I called my dad. I'm like, what the heck is this? And he's like, oh, we had a few stores that used to put mynah birds in the stores to attract people. Again, before all those pesky health regulations came in. You cannot do that today, I learned. But this picture I love because the only photo I found of the mynah birds, and they were in quite a few stores, is this one celebrating travelers from foreign countries. And I see the kids don't look super excited, and I can understand why, because I thought this looks like a cool, fun thing to do. Well, I looked it up. It turns out that mynah birds are native to India, so they come all the way to the US and they see what they can get at home. But he created an experience. This is another one I love. This little boy with the blue shorts sent me that photo on LinkedIn. This is a date shake. So if you've ever been to Arizona, you'll see they serve date shakes. So you went to a Stuckey's in Arizona and you get a date shake. You would not find that anywhere else. The other thing I really liked about Stuckey's is that every store had a different experience, but we were always consistent, not only in the look, but in being a welcoming place and being hospitable and being a place where everyone knew that they could come and they would be home. And I'll tell you a great example, and it was on the very first slide of my grandfather. It says, every traveler is a friend. That's what he would say. And he really lived that. And one of the things I'm most proud of is that during segregation, during the 1950s and 60s, we were one of the very few chains on the interstate highway system that was never segregated. And if you see the movie, yes, yeah. If you see the movie The Green Book, there's a scene at a Stuckey's. If you have not seen the movie, see it. It's wonderful. Yeah. And so we were a gathering place. We were a place that built community. We were a place that felt like home. And I wanted to show this picture because I know Carl and so many of you here, and like myself, you're people of faith. This is the Sunday drive where people used to do that after church. So this is taking the Sunday drive, and people would come to Stuckey's in their Sunday best and pull over and get a shake. So here's the last lesson I learned, and that is the art of reinvention. So in order to bring back my family's brand, I had to pivot and I had to reinvent because we don't own any stores anymore. I wish we did. Wah, wah, I had a quick pity party for myself and that was over. I had to figure out how am I gonna make money for this company and what's really driving the brand. And that is the product. We started as a pecan stand on the side of the road, and so the way we rebuilt the company is I got a business partner who happens to be a cousin, so we're keeping in the family. He's a third-generation pecan farmer, and we got a SBA loan, Small Business Administration loan, to buy a candy plant and a pecan shelling plant in Middle Georgia, Rennes, Georgia, wonderful small community. And we saved that plant. It was going to shut down if we hadn't bought it and had been there since 1935. And my grandfather had done business with the original founder, who also owned a Stuckey store that was right across the street from the plant that's still there. It's now the Dutch House. So I just felt like all this was meant to be. So we got a loan, we bought the candy plant, and we rebranded. And I love the rebranding was really going back to our roots. It was an homage to my grandfather. So that's the original Stuckey's logo. We brought that back. So we have these classic designs, but hopefully in a fresh way. And so we're now making all of the product ourselves. It had been outsourced for generations. We were getting pecans from Mexico, and the product was being made in Ohio. It was not the same as when my grandfather made the candies and my grandmother made the candy. So we went back to the original recipes. We got back to the best ingredients you can get. We don't have imitation vanilla. We have real vanilla. We don't have high fructose corn syrup. We have real sugar. And we have pecans that are 100% sourced from local farmers. We buy all our packaging in the US. We quit exporting from China, no disrespect, but we're all about supporting our local economies. Our packaging's from North Carolina and another place in Georgia. We get our corrugated cardboard from Albany, Georgia. Albany, and actually in Georgia they say Albany. So everything is locally made, locally sourced, 100% manufactured in America. And so we're bringing back the pecan log roll, we're bringing back the company, and we're also branding. My mother was horrified that I brought back this thing, which was our #1 selling t-shirt. It says, "Eat here and get gas." We sell gas. And that shirt was super popular in the 1970s, and all these people on Facebook kept saying, "When are you bringing that shirt back?" So we can't afford marketing research. My marketing research is reading all the social media comments. And I thought, okay, the customers are wanting this, so we ordered it. My mother called me, just, "Honey, that's so tacky." And we sold out. We're now in our 3rd order of those, so those are great. And we're bringing it back with the help of other small businesses who we love and respect, like Kim's Barbecue Shack in Branson, Missouri. They have a whole Stuckey section. Parker's in Savannah and Charleston. There's one in Texas, Comanche's Attic. And so we're getting accounts all over the place. We have over 5,000 different stores that are now selling Stuckey's products. That's how we got the 12+ million in sales, is we're selling our product all over the country. And we're also selling to big chains, because big chains help us make some big money. Casey's, 2,300 locations in the Midwest. Easy Mart is in Texas and Arkansas. And then I'll close by telling you my come to Jesus moment, because I think any entrepreneur, if you're facing hard times, you have a come to Jesus moment. And this was mine. One of the things I did was I went on a road trip when I first bought the company, and I visited all of our locations that were still standing. The original stores, there's 15 original stores. This one in Marion, Arkansas looked so bad that I could not even figure out how to photograph it, because I was posting pictures of every store, and I could not post a picture of that. It just looked horrid. And so this is what I posted. I have a dashboard Jesus. I thought it looked slightly better. And I remember my vice president calling me, and he's like, "Stephanie, you've got to quit posting pictures of the stores, and you create this fantasy that the stores are in such great shape." And they're all fixer-uppers. Most of them are. There are a few that look okay. He's like, "They don't look good. So don't be telling people to stop." And I said, "But we need the money. We need people to stop." And so we were going back and forth. And finally, this was really the come to Jesus moment. I said, okay, I'm just going to post what our stores are like. And so I put this up on social media, and you can read it, but it says, "Been driving the back roads." That day I was in Alabama in search of Stuckey's, determined to reclaim and rebrand them. Like our country, Stuckey's is a fixer-upper, but I'm ready to do everything I can to help heal and rebuild both. And so what I was doing there was telling people, this is the situation we're in, but we're all in this together. We're all going through hard times. This was right when COVID started to hit and everything was shutting down. And I said, we're part of this journey together. And before that, I would get like maybe 20 likes for some of my LinkedIn posts. Within a day, I had like 2,000 likes. And within a month, that post had over 500,000 views. And so what that told me is there is a community out there of other small businesses, of people who still believe in comebacks, people who still believe in small town values, people who want to see family businesses survive and make it. And so that's how we're really building the company forward. Brand building is community building. This man in the neon hat wrote me and he said, you ought to have a booth at our Kentucky Locomotive Festival. And I said, I can't afford to have a booth at your Locomotive Festival. You're talking to the entire marketing department. That's me. I'm the CEO. I'm also the chief marketing officer, the chief archivist, the chief storyteller, and the chief salesperson. If you run a business, guess what? You can be CEO, but you also have to do like 20 other things. And I said, I can't do your Locomotive Festival. And he said, I'll do it for you. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll send you a case of Stuckey's log rolls, you do the booth. And so that's what he did. And so brand building is community building. He sent me that post. And we're all about the road trip. Even though we don't own any of the stores, we still are about the spirit of the road trip, the storytelling around the road trip, creating memories and bringing families and people together with road trips. And so, yes, I will pull over every time for the world's largest boiled peanut, and that is how the sign spells it. You have to love small town America. Boiled peanut. And I guess they didn't have enough room for the E's. It's pretty funny. And we're also about truckers, so we love people who like to travel America. I spent a day with her riding her truck, and that was amazing. And we love motorcyclists. We love anyone who likes to explore small town America. So it's about building community. And one of the biggest questions I get is, well, how are you introducing your brand to the next generation? Organically. This is starting to happen. I'm getting posts from people who are sending me posts of their children and their grandchildren at Stuckey's with them. So that's really how we're bringing the brand back, is people sharing with their families, which is how our brand was built. And it's about finding your tribe. Who are your people? Who's really going to root for you? Who's going to be part of your journey? So this is my last slide, and it's about celebrating other small businesses. Whenever I go anywhere, I always like to ask, what's the cool small business in town that's like 3-4 generations? So I was in Norfolk, Virginia, and I learned very quickly because I said Norfolk, and they made fun of me, so it's Norfolk, Virginia. And I said, what's the cool small business? And they said, Dumar's Ice Cream. The founder of Dumar's is their grandfather who invented the waffle cone. The ice cream cone, the waffle cone, was invented by Adolf Dumar. And I'm sorry, I got his first name wrong. It was not Adolf, but it begins with an Abe Dumar. And they still have, we're standing in front of it, the world's first waffle cone maker is still at their store, and they still make several hundred waffle cones every single day there. And it's been there since the 1915. It was like 1915, 1910. And the grandchildren are running it. So that's what we stand for. We stand for third generation, fourth generation businesses. We stand for the companies that actually stick it out and make it. We stand for small town America. And with that, yeah.